Hello and welcome everyone. This is a presentation by the Florida Model Legislature. My name is Caitlin Works Figueroa and I am the Associate Program Director. This presentation is going to serve as an overview for the rules of procedure that we use at the Florida Model Legislature, and we recommend that you review this presentation at least twice and ask any applicable questions before attending our conference. First, we're going to review the three key areas of debate and chamber protocols, which are privilege of the floor, speaking, and debate. The actual room and floor on which the chamber proceedings take place is ceremoniously called the floor. It is an honored space that is prohibited to anyone except the members of the body. The Senate chamber should only be entered by members of the Senate, and the House chamber should only be entered by members of the House. Every attendee at the Florida Model Legislature should be in their respective sessions at the same time. If a session gets out early, members are not allowed to enter other sessions. Advisors are always welcome to sit or stand in the back. Because the floor is considered an honored space, members must dress appropriately when they are in session. Let's review. The men in this picture follow every rule with the exception of one sporting a well-groomed beard, which is acceptable. The woman in this photo is also following every rule. All four of them were clearly well prepared. Next, we're going to go over the speaking. Understanding how to properly speak on the House and Senate floor is very easy, and if you go into the chamber sessions with an understanding of how to act, you will likely feel comfortable enough to actively participate. First, you must gain recognition from the chair to speak. They will ask you, for what purpose do you rise? Or maybe for what purpose do you seek recognition? You will always address the presiding officer as Mr. or Madam Speaker if you're in the House, or Mr. or Madam President if you're in the Senate. Once they recognize you, you can take up the entire time allotted, or you can yield any remainder of your time. We're going to go over that in a few. Notice how the member went to the front of the chamber to speak. This is typically the most proper way to debate or present bills. Be sure to remain on topic. If you are unsure of what is being discussed, rise to a point of information and ask what is being debated. You should also avoid personal reference. Notice that this speaker has said, "Thank you, Mr. Speaker, my constituents believe." You may also say, "This bill is essential to maybe the waterways of Florida, the infrastructure of Florida, the citizens of Florida." However, it would not be appropriate to say that I think this is the best bill because it helps any personal situation or anything along those lines. Because in both of these situations presented, you're making a personal reference. On to debate. There are three types of debate at the Florida Model Legislature. The structure of how and when you are addressed will depend on which form of debate is moved, and the time frame of each debate will depend on the type of debate structure your chamber selects. We're going to go ahead and get into some pro-con debate. Now, pro-con debate is the most structured form of debate. A specific number of rounds are set, and each round adheres to the assigned time frame. The presiding officer will recognize all those wishing to speak in favor or pro until either the time expires or there are no longer any speakers left to speak in favor of the motion. The presiding officer will then recognize all members wishing to speak in opposition of the motion until, again, either the time expires or there are no longer any speakers. This process will continue until the specified number of rounds are exhausted. This is a good structure to use because it's easy to follow and clear to everyone. Notice that in this image, and the second one as well, only one member is standing at a time. This is how pro-con debate should look. With regards to time, you will typically hear a motion for 2 rounds, 2 minutes each of pro-con debate, or something along a similar time frame. That motion would provide 8 total minutes of debate, and you wouldn't really want to exceed that because the debate would become repetitive. Now, a motion to convene as a whole would bring the chamber to an open but structured debate. Any member may speak for or against the bill at any time, but they must stay on topic, stay at their seats, and always seek a recognition from the chair. Notice that in this image, multiple legislators are standing in an attempt to be recognized next. Typically, the time frame would be 5 minutes, but it could be more. A motion for an unmoderated caucus would bring the chamber to an open debate among legislators where members are free to move about the chamber and speak with one another. The chair does not preside over conversation during this time. This is not to be confused with a recess, however, and with the exception of a personal privilege, all members should remain in the room and engaged in debate when the chamber is in an unmoderated caucus. Now, when it comes to debate, it is important to yield the remainder of your time after you have finished your statement during debate. Let's see why that is. We see the legislator who is recognized closes his argument without yielding his time. The presiding officer announces that because time was not yielded, the chamber is in order for the next round of debate. The legislator has just forfeited any remaining time and it cannot be recovered. This can have a negative impact on the legislation you were speaking on as well as your colleagues. In terms of legislation, that time could have been crucial to convince some other legislators to vote on your side. In terms of your colleagues, this will limit their ability to participate. Yielding your time is a better way to participate. Let's see what that would look like. With a very simple phrase, "I yield my time," the legislator has successfully ensured those on his side can continue to speak. Legislators may also yield their time to a specific colleague, and that colleague is automatically recognized by the presiding officer. The presiding officer notes that time has been yielded. He or she will then recognize the next speaker for whatever amount of time remains. It is important that you understand how to participate in the question period of the proceedings. All questions must be non-debatable and technical in nature. This is a pretty straightforward concept, but sometimes you will have to consider whether or not a question is debatable. Let's review 5 questions. Looking at the first one, do teachers support this bill? Is this a non-debatable technical question? The answer is no. It is debatable whether or not teachers in general, across the board, or even on an individual level support any legislation. A question could be asked regarding statistics or if teachers have been surveyed and what that survey found. However, the question as it appears here is debatable. How about the second one? Does this bill end current discounts? Now, in this example, we're going to assume that the legislation specifically states whether or not a bill would end current discounts. And therefore, it is a non-debatable technical question. A bill would need to specifically state that it is ending any discount related to the legislation. On question 3, will this bill increase taxes? Is this a non-debatable technical question? No. In general, this would be very heavily debatable. On to question 4. What current laws are amended? This is a great example of a non-debatable technical question, and laws being amended should be specified in every bill. The last one, has similar legislation passed elsewhere? This is also a great non-debatable technical question. A simple yes or no, or the sponsor could be unfamiliar, in which case they would have to state they're not sure. On to the rules of voting. Now let's talk about that. The first rule of voting is simple. All members must vote. This is because the Florida Legislature is only part-time and members do not have the luxury to not participate. We should all be familiar with the fact that different methods of voting exist. It is always up to the presiding officer to ask the vote to happen in the most clear and concise way possible. Some examples are by voice, show of hands, roll call. Something that may be surprising to some of you is that the presiding officer in the Florida Legislature is able to vote on more than one occasion. Of course, they can vote to break a tie, but they can also vote if their vote will affect the outcome. So if the vote is 49 to 50, the presiding officer could vote to leave the margin at a dead tie, essentially killing the motion. Additionally, the presiding officer may vote on final passage of a bill because they are also active members of the legislative body. Let's discuss the order of business. The order of business is essentially the permanent agenda that is followed at the beginning of each chamber meeting. The presiding officer will call the meeting to order. Here we can see exactly what they would say. They would then ask for all members to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, and they will lead the pledge. The presiding officer will ask that the secretary or clerk take roll and announce quorum. Quorum is not set at the total number of conference attendees assigned to each chamber. It is set at the total number of members present during the quorum call. If a large portion of the chamber is missing, business will continue as usual, and when these members arrive, they will need to motion for a quorum call. If they do not, the simple majority and two-thirds majority vote threshold will remain at the numbers set during the quorum call. There will not always be messages from the opposite chamber. However, it is appropriate to announce messages regarding which bills have passed. The consent calendar will be established before the chamber is in session. The chamber leaders will set their own calendar with the advice of the program directors. If a member wishes to change the consent calendar, they will need to make the following motion. This requires a two-thirds majority. Any unfinished business will be addressed. This would include bills that were not completely addressed at the last meeting and therefore laid on the table. The presiding officer will then announce that it is time for the passage of bills. This means the legislators will start at the top of the consent calendar and work their way down until either they run out of bills or they run out of time. You'll hear a lot about readings. Let's go over the 3 readings. Now, each bill must be read 3 times before it can be passed through the chamber. The first reading comes when the bill is published in the program and assigned to a committee. The second reading occurs when the bill is introduced on the chamber floor. This is the motion that will prompt the second reading. It can be found in the long-form Rules of Procedure, Appendix 2. The third reading occurs when the bill is placed on final passage, meaning when the chamber is preparing to vote on the bill. This is the motion that will prompt the third reading. It can also be found in the long-form Rules of Procedure, Appendix 2. Preceding motions. We're going to cover the 9 primary motions you will use during debate and how to present them. They fall in order of precedence or in order of priority. We will cover them in order highest priority to lowest priority. Adjourn. A motion to adjourn is used to end a meeting. A motion to table needs to include until what time the motion is going to be left on the table. Any member on the prevailing side may move to reconsider a motion that has already passed or failed. When you move the previous question, you are asking to go to an immediate vote. Whether or not the chamber will go to an immediate vote is voted on and requires the two-thirds majority to pass. A motion to limit debate sets new parameters on the current debate at hand. A motion to temporarily postpone places the question, meaning the bill currently in question, onto the consent calendar at the next meeting and ends current debate. A motion to postpone to a certain time would move that specific motion or bill that you're considering to a different time in your current meeting. There are no voice amendments at the Florida Model Legislature. Amendments will be addressed in the order that they are received, and this motion can be used to bring up the amendments on the desk. If a bill is passed without an enacting clause, it is not being enacted by any legislative body and is therefore meaningless. To remove an enacting clause is to reject the bill, and the bill will not be considered any further. These are the 9 preceding motions that are outlined in your short form Rules of Procedure along with others. With that, I want to thank you for your time and for reviewing this presentation. Please share any questions you have